Twilight Imperium, Shards of the Throne, by Christian T. Peterson, narrated by Mark Restuccia. Scout Unit H-256, Sol 67th Marine Division, Second Moon of Kalhadar. Captain Jal Dukan was annoyed. The men, recognizing his sullen mood, gave him a wide berth as they expertly moved into the dark and desolated Sivhab block. It was the 5th month of campaigning and the H-256's first incursion. 5 months coagulating in the hold of a third-generation cruiser only to be dropped on an abandoned moon for a survey mission. Jal spat bitterly onto the ashen soil. Some incursion. While the Corward and Central Battle Groups of Joint Task Force Salient Sun had been engaged with the enemy for weeks, the Rimwood Group had seen no action. A few naval skirmishes, sure, but no honest work for leatherneck specialists like the men of Unit H-256. Rita is going to return home a barking colonel, and I'll be lucky to get combat pay. Jal's friend had been assigned to the Central Battle Group. Everyone had heard rumours of the successes that the 81st had chalked up against the L1Z1X on Tiamat and Herculor. He's going to be unbearable, the braggart. I don't like this, Captain. The sound of the deep, heavily accented voice broke Jal's introversion, upping his annoyance another notch. This notion of a joint task force was well and good, but expecting him to be happy about a training embedment was beyond reasonable. I don't like this, Captain Jal, Grok Waisho repeated. The huge extra warrior's yellow eyes warily scanned the abandoned buildings around them, his slug rifle held ready. He's actually nervous. Jal was disgusted. They're expecting me to train a rookie. I heard you the first time, Jal snapped and stopped. Listen, I don't like this either. We're stuck in the arse end of rim space, scouting a worthless barren moon, while all the glory is had Corward. On top of that sad story, I'm stuck with training your scaly behind. So, there's plenty not to like. Jal gave the alien his hardest, don't mess with me face. He needn't look to know his men were watching the dress down with wry smiles. But Waisho wasn't cowed. He calmly studied Jal with his big yellow eyes, starlight dully outlining the leathery hide of his beaked face. Moments passed. Jal was the first to break, sensing the unseen attention of his men waning. Damn alien. And what is it exactly, Jal growled, that you don't like, Grok Waisho? The extra studied Jal for another second, blinked, then gestured towards one of the structures they'd just passed. We were told the 1X abandoned this moon, he said, using the sole shorthand term for the L1Z1X enemy. I wonder if he knows that we call his race the 2X. Jal glanced at the structure towards which Waisho was pointing. It was an old 1X defensive position, now silent and broken in the cold night air. That's right. They abandoned the sector, Jal said, and we're here to survey the little half-robo-rats and roaches they left behind. Jal gestured at the extra's heavy slug rifle. Think your little boomstick can handle that, extra? The men grunted in restrained amusement. Ignoring the slight, Waisho stepped away from the captain and moved towards the ruined structure. Yet their defensive positions are destroyed, said the extra, pushing at one of the splintered beams. It grated across the dilapidated pile, pulverized ceramics and metal girders shifting in the darkness. Jal sighed. Kalhadar Moon Classroom, Professor Dukin presiding. Scorched earth, Jal said as he bent down to gather up a 1X rifle from the rubble, dust falling from its broken barrel like water from a faucet. Don't leave anything behind for your enemy. He waved the broken weapon to illustrate the point, then let it drop back down onto the street. And let them waste their resources scouting this worthless orb of a moon.
Their weapons are still here, as are the targeting systems.
Waisho pushed more rubble out of the way. The main heavy repeater gun was still in its stand. Below the weapon, sophisticated targeting and communication systems sat powerless in their chassis, all covered with the fine dust that seemed to be everywhere on this moon. Jael shrugged. Must have been in a hurry. He turned and gestured for his men to continue their patrol. They roused soundlessly and moved into the darkness ahead. The X-Jar continued to rummage through the ruined structure.
This one wasn't in a hurry.
Waisho's accent made the last word sound like "hurry." Jael turned. Enough with the lessons. He was about to bark at the X-Jar again, but stopped. In the rubble lay the broken body of a 1X guardsman. Augmetics covered the lower face and pate of the soldier, but his organic eyes, filled with dust, were open in death. His armoured chest plate had been torn apart with what appeared to be massive shears. The X-Char looked at Jael carefully, as if measuring him. Then the alien sighed and undid the safety of his slug rifle.
The enemy did not abandon this moon because of us, Captain, he said. They fought something here before they left.
Waisho checked his ammo count.
Or maybe they didn't leave,
he continued, tilting his head at the dead soldier.
Maybe they died here.
Jael walked back to the ruined structure and knelt to study the mangled body. As he did, Waisho studied the Sivhab around them, yellow eyes looking for signs of movement in the silent windows. The H-256 had been inserted into the largest of 3 primary settlements on Kalhadar's second moon. The place had been home to a community of foodstuff colonists, to farmers. The atmosphere on the moon was thin but breathable, and the soil supposedly excellent for growing roots. The settlement, called Astaria according to the charts, was human, but like so many remote human settlements of this age, not part of the Federation. Instead, it had given its fealty to a Nalu governor a system or so forward. Jael guessed Astaria had once been home to a few 100,000 souls, a root farmer metropolis. They were all gone now, dead most likely, or slaves to the 1X. Orbital bioscans had shown nothing alive on the moon with a signature larger than that of a small dog. The place was depressing. Jael traced a finger along the massive cut in the armoured chest of the dead 1X guard. Did the colonists do this? Did they rise up against the invaders? Unlikely. The 1X were unforgiving and effective warriors. A mob of farmers wouldn't have stood a chance. If not them, then who? Jael reached for his comlink and pressed the transmitter.
Hi, this is the H-256. Do you copy?
Waisho didn't glance down, but Jael could sense the alien's satisfaction in having the issue escalated. The transmitter buzzed.
H-256, this is Hi, copy.
Hi, this is Captain Dukin. Give me Traw.
Stand by, Captain.
Waisho seemed to sniff at the air, his head cocked towards the sky. The large alien warrior was growing more restless by the second. Jael noticed a feral quality in the X-Jar's careful movements. Had he misjudged his embedded trainee?
What do you smell, alien? Something's about to happen, Captain Jael.
The X-Jar slipped a small device out of his battlesuit, his slitted eyes intently studying the readouts. A motion sensor. Jael had a similar device in his pack. Expensive. Among Federation scouts, only captains or higher were outfitted with lightweight motion sensors.
You should recall your men, Captain,
Waisho said, in as close to a whisper the alien could muster. He expertly slipped the sensor back into his suit.
Motion?
Jael asked.
Why am I whispering?
The X-Jar shook his head.
Intuition.
Jael, what do you have? Colonel Traw's voice boomed in the receiver. Waisho frowned at the volume level. Jael turned it down. Jael? Colonel Traw was not a man accustomed to waiting. Waisho looked down at Jael, big yellow eyes intent and alert.
Recall your men, Captain.
Jael ignored the extra.
Sir, we found something here.
He considered his next words.
Do we know for sure why the enemy abandoned this moon?
Jael sensed Traw's impatience.
As I told you in mission orientation, Captain, they've withdrawn to support their defences against our forward action.
The colonel suddenly paused. Jael heard agitated chatter in the background.
Stand by, Jael. Seems I got another unit checking in.
Damn. Jael switched transmission frequency.
Gather and caution,
he said in a low voice to the H-256th unit channel. Ahead, in the shadows, his men would check their weapons and start their return to him. That was when the first distant explosion lit the dusty atmosphere with a dull orange flash. A second or so later, the dull crunch of impact followed. Jael estimated the distance to be 2 miles to the south. Sliver rocket. A Federation scout unit had fired its heavy weapon.
At what?
The remote clacking of firearms followed. Then another rocket impact.
H-256, to me.
Jael stood and roared down the street. Transmitter be damned. More rocket blasts, more rifle fire, this time to the west. Another Federation unit had engaged. Engaged what? The men began expertly emerging from the shadows ahead, silently and with weapons ready. Lieutenant Germain stopped a few feet from Jael, a curt dip of his head, an unsaid inquiry.
What are your orders?
Jael was about to say, we go south to help, when he saw subtle movement out of the corner of his eye. A long, dark shape slithered against the dust and rubble with a metallic sound, like a chain dragged over dry leaves.
Contact!
Private Jens fired into the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark street. Waisho grunted unhappily. Jens's shooting seemed to wake more of whatever it was Jael had seen. Over the clattering of rifle fire, Jael heard the slithering noise intensify, this time from several directions. And there was another sound, the thin sonic whine of batteries, servos, and forced air coolant systems coming online. Dozens of them. Private Jens died, and the firing momentarily stopped. His body had been sliced in two by such sharp force that it left him standing whole for a few seconds before he slid apart. Then the street came alive. From windows, from alleys, from beneath dusty rubble, things rose. Slim, snake-like appendages of dark-banded metal, each a dozen or so yards in length. They emerged like a school of kraken breaching the surface of a grey ocean. At the tip of each tentacle was a slim, leaf-shaped blade, black and sharp in the starlight. A low thump sounded to Jael's right, followed immediately by the splintering of black metal vertebrae and flying fragments that stung his face. The shot from Waisho's slug rifle had severed the closest of the tentacles, its live end thrashing like a wounded snake. The business end, the one with the bladed spike that surely would have speared Jael's head, undulated in death throes at the captain's feet. Pandemonium erupted as the men of the H-256 all began firing as one. Like a kick in the eardrum, Jael felt the jet vacuum of a sliver rocket shoot past him. 50 yards ahead, the rocket impacted its target with a dull crump that sent dust and metal fragments spinning through the already thick chaos of rifle shots and waving metallic appendages. The recipient of the rocket was briefly revealed in the red bloom of the explosion.
It was as large as a Carnivore-class tank. Its bloated exoskeletal body was segmented in black metal plates that twisted like living scales, propelling the monstrous body towards Jael's unit.
The thing had no head or face, only a nexus of those metal tentacles, each extending nearly a city block to slash and stab at the soldiers. Jael unslung his rifle and sent a volley of plasma in the general direction of the monstrosity while he tried to read the tactical situation. 3 of his men were dead already, Lieutenant Germain among them. A few more wounded, but nobly keeping up the job of destroying flailing tendrils with rifle shots and heavy slugs. The things seemed to come from everywhere. There must be at least 5 of those monsters out there, Jael thought. The able men of the H-256, a good dozen now, were dodging and firing the best they knew how, but this couldn't last long. Jonas Kemp, the unit's heavy weapons specialist, sent another sliver rocket into the darkness before he was impaled simultaneously by 3 tendrils. Howling, Jonas was violently retracted into the darkness. Jael never saw Jonas again. Waisho fired another shot. The stabbing head of another tentacle exploded in a mist of metallic dust. "Into the yellow building," the ex-jar boomed over the din. Even if his accent made it sound like Jollo Bulldun, Jael couldn't agree more.
He repeated the order with a bark, adding a traditional Seoul "go, go, go."
Then the flyers struck. About half of Jael's men had ducked inside the doorway of the yellow sieve home when the sky suddenly began to rain molten darts. Jael took 3 hits to his upper shoulders before throwing himself into cover under the doorway. The 2 men behind him were torn to shreds. The barrage of darts stopped as suddenly as it had started. Over the grating and banging of the tentacles, they heard an unfamiliar oscillating whoop of many small but powerful propellers. Then, like evil daddy longlegs, about 20 enemy drones dropped into street view. Each of the machines had 3 lightweight propellers protruding from serrated backs. Hanging from each drone was a collection of slender robotic legs, each brimming with strange lightweight weaponry. Their heads consisted of a bald collection of whirring cameras, moving and refocusing constantly, each emanating a dull red glow. "Let 'em have it," Jael ordered his men. Jael emptied his plasma magazine into the face of the nearest flyer. The thing disintegrated, legs blowing off of it like rotten stalks. Its head exploded with an electric hiss, and its body crashed to the ground in a mess of metal joints. One of its propellers had been pried loose by Jael's shots and careened like a saw blade into another of the flyers. The second flyer was torn apart in a storm of white sparks. Gotcha. Another 4 of the insectile machines were destroyed by Jael's men before the remaining drones had calculated their situation. Delicate servos whining, they each raised 2 of their many legs in line with the yellow sieve home, and the hellish rain of darts started again. The survivors of the H-256 fell to the floor and rolled desperately against the front wall as thousands of tiny red-hot darts disintegrated the plaster of the outside walls and anything in view of doorways and windows. The sound was thunderous. Dust and bits of building flew everywhere. After what seemed an hour, but couldn't have been more than a few seconds, the intensity of the shooting lessened. Jael straightened his helmet and brushed the dust off his face. His ears were ringing, and he didn't feel right. He was dizzy, nauseous, his vision blurry. "Come on, soldier." He shook his head to clear it up. It didn't help. Did they use gas? A sickness suddenly erupted in his middle, and Jael heaved his guts onto the floor. As he recovered, he realized Waisho was next to him. One of the ex-char's strong arms had propped him against the wall while the alien investigated the wounds on his back. "What, are you a medic trainee now?" Jael quipped drunkenly. The ex-char didn't laugh. It wasn't funny. A few of the men had started returning fire, and from the sound of it, they were nailing a few more of those damned daddy longlegs. The ex-char produced a thin plastic-sealed cylinder from his vest. He bit off the cylinder's wrapper and plunged its short, thick syringe into Jael's upper back. Jael squealed like a stuck pig, the needle stabbing him like a knife. The 2X must have some damn tough skin. The injected fluid stung like a scorpion bite. Almost immediately, Jael's entire body began to burn like hot soup. Waisho grabbed Jael's moaning face, prying open one of the captain's eyelids. "Arsenic poisoning," the alien mumbled, and released Jael. "From the dart wounds." Jael threw up again. a dry heave. His body still felt like warm goo, but his vision was clearing a bit already. "Thanks. I get that a lot." "You'll live." Waisho nodded in satisfaction and took up his slug rifle to help in the defense. "At least for another few minutes," he added. The barrage of flaming darts continued, now rejoined by the tentacles stabbing at the walls and lashing the windows and doorways. The screech of metal on ceramite was like a needle poking in the brain. The noise cleared Jael's head. "You just happen to have medication for arsenic poisoning with you?" Jael asked the extra between a round of firing. The alien glanced at the recovering captain, shrugged, and took another shot at a drone that had come too close. The enemy exploded in a white flash of burning phosphor and the stink of ozone. "You know what those things are, don't you?" Jael gestured to the street as he groped for his rifle and inched toward the window. Damned if he wouldn't have some of the action too. Waisho thought for a moment. "My commanders recently came to suspect something dangerous was infesting this quadrant," he said. Jael noticed smoke. The back of the house had begun smouldering, no doubt ignited by the heaping piles of red-hot projectiles. The extra had seen it too, but seemed far more concerned with the enemy in front of the building.
"At first we thought the 1X had some form of new weapon, an advanced force of some kind,"
Waisho continued.
"But there were intercepts, indications that the 1X themselves were fighting it."
"I guess this place proves that theory," Jael said as he stabbed his knife into a metallic tendril that had slithered over the windowsill near him. The knife grated in between two joints. Jael twisted the blade, sending sparks flying. With a violent jerk, the tendril retreated back into the street, Jael's knife with it. The ex-char nodded distractedly. He was now listening for something. Jael heard it too, a deep rumbling that made the floor jitter. Something big was coming. Waisho gestured at Jael's transmitter.
"Now would be a good time for another helpful talk with your CO."
Jael grabbed his transmitter and adjusted the signal. Nothing. He drew back the flap of his equipment pack. The transmitter was smoking. It had taken 2 direct hits by the arsenic darts. Jael looked at the extra and shook his head. So much for the cavalry. The rumbling grew louder and the ground began to shake tangibly. A thought occurred to Jael. "Waisho?" he asked. "When you were assigned to the H-256, I was told you were a training embedment." The extra reloaded his weapon.
"That's right,"
he grunted. It sounded like "Das Root." Jael grinned. "Except we weren't supposed to train you, were we?" The extra blinked once, then cocked his head to look at Jael with his large yellow eyes.
"No, Captain,"
Waisho answered.
"I was tasked to train your fleshy little behind."
Jael couldn't help but laugh out loud. It hurt his wounded shoulders. Then he noticed the rumbling had stopped. Whatever vile device the enemy was deploying, it had apparently rolled into position. "At least I don't have to worry about getting combat pay," Jael thought, and reloaded his weapon. The real fighting was about to begin. This audio recording is copyright Fantasy Flight Games 2025, all rights reserved. Produced and published by Aconite Books. For more from the universe of Twilight Imperium, visit aconitebooks.com and subscribe to the Aconite Fiction Podcast.